like to write various different kinds of things. So keeping myself interested, challenged, and engaged, writing a trilogy was really difficult. And one of the ways I decided to do that was by experimenting with structural stuff. So Pandemonium takes place in 2 different time frames, and you kind of ping pong back and forth between them as the story kind of goes forward. When it came time to write Requiem, I wanted to do something different also, although it also had to kind of be, as the 3rd book, final book in the series, it had to really encompass everything and tie everything together in a certain way. So with Requiem, I introduce actually a second point of view. We hear not just from Lena, but we hear from Lena's best friend, Hannah, as well. And the 2 perspectives go back and forth until eventually their stories converge. I'm quite proud of it because A, it's kind of an unusual choice to introduce a second narrator in the 3rd book of a series, but also it allows us to see the society from a very, very different lens than Lena's. I will read just a short portion of it. And it's very hard to read without giving away spoilers for Pandemonium, which I don't want to do in case anybody hasn't read it, which again you should. But I will read just a very short passage, and yeah, can I borrow your book? Thanks. So I'm going to read from Hannah's point of view, because it's impossible to read anything from Lena's point of view without giving away major spoilers. For those of you who have read Pandemonium, and you know what happens on the last page, it's impossible to read any part of Lena's point of view without giving that away. So this is Hannah. Want to know my deep, dark secret? In Sunday school, I used to cheat on the quizzes. I could never get into the book of Shh, not even as a kid. The only section of the book that interested me at all was Legends and Grievances, which is full of folk tales about the world before the cure. My favorite, the story of Solomon, goes like this. Once upon a time, during the days of sickness, 2 women and an infant went before the king. Each woman claimed that the infant was hers. Both refused to give the child to the other woman and pleaded their cases passionately, each claiming that she would die of grief if the baby were not returned solely to her possession. The king, whose name was Solomon, listened to both their speeches and at last announced that he had a fair solution. We'll cut the baby in 2, he said, and that way each of you will have a portion. The women agreed that this was fair, and so the executioner was brought forward, and with his axe he sliced the baby cleanly in 2. And the baby never cried or so much as made a sound, and the mothers looked on, and afterward, for 1,000 years, there was a spot of blood on the palace floor that could never be cleaned or diluted by any substance on earth. I must have been only 8 or 9 when I read that passage for the first time, but it really struck me. For days I couldn't get the image of that poor baby out of my head. I kept picturing it split open on the tile floor like a butterfly pinned behind glass. That's what's so great about the story. It's real. What I mean is, even if it didn't actually happen, it shows the world truthfully. I remember feeling just like that baby, torn apart by feeling, split in 2, caught between loyalties and desires. That's how the diseased world is. That's how it was for me before I was cured. You're welcome. I should also say, as a side note, or not a side note, but right now, or in about a week, they're going to be filming the Delirium TV pilot, starring Emma Roberts. And I'm very excited, and I'm also excited because the 2 boys who've been cast, Julian and Alex, are so Julian and Alex, it's ridiculous. Like, the guy who plays Julian wrote me a message, a private message, and was like, just want to let you know I'm going to work so hard for you, and I'm going to try to do everybody proud. Like, you know, it's going to be such an honor to meet you. And then, like, you know, Alex shows up, like, in his leather motorcycle jacket, like, on a motorcycle. I mean, the guy who plays Alex, I'm like, come on, guys. So I'm very excited about that. The End by Lauren Oliver. No, but now I will take your brilliant questions. They don't have to be brilliant. They can just be normal.
Team Alex or Team Julie?
Not going to answer that. I guess I won't answer that. I guess I won't take your questions. What do you do if I just threw my glass down and left the stage? Yeah. Not going to answer that. Yeah.
You said that you didn't like how you titled things. What were your original, did you have like your original title for Delirium before?
I did. It was more Delirium Nervosa. And my editor was like, a little less Latin, a little more commercialism. Thanks. But that's, you know, the name of the disease. So from Delirium, it was short-lived. But then for Pandemonium, Requiem was actually titled by fans on my blog. I reached out to fans and I said, I'm terrible at titling. I can't think of, you know, I can't think of a title. Do you guys have any suggestions? And even though the books weren't even out, and not only that, they hadn't been written, 2 different people were like, Pandemonium, Requiem, and they work perfectly. So I've decided to outsource all my work to my fans now.
And what made you decide when you had the idea for the trilogy to actually make it a trilogy? Was it that you had so many ideas you couldn't put it in one?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little hard to say exactly, but yeah, I mean, basically that I felt that there were 3 independent movements within it. So there were 3 kind of natural breaking points. I mean, I guess presumably I could have just written a 900-page book, certainly some people do, but it seemed like there were 3 kind of natural breaking points, and that, yeah, there was just a lot of material. I mean, I feel that Lena's story is complete, and that my role in her story is complete, because the weird thing about being a writer is that you end up feeling that your characters have external reality. Like, for example, there was a character I really wanted to kill off in Requiem, but the character just refused to die. And I ended up feeling like, well, if that's how you feel, you know. So I felt that, so I feel like Lena's story is done, but one of the reasons I'm excited it's going to be a TV show is that I feel that there's so much still that you could explore and that could be kind of expanded and investigated, and I'm really actually excited to have the experience of kind of a fan, like experiencing that, you know? Like, I feel like my role is done in the fiction, but I'm like, no, there's so much more to this world, you know? It's a rich tapestry. So.
With the TV show, so many fans were so shocked, and some of them weren't exactly happy with the changes that they were making.
Yeah.
I just wanted to know that when they first approached you with the idea of Delirium as the TV show, were you ever at any point surprised or not happy with what they were changing, or were you always open to that?
I mean, I definitely was surprised by some of the things, but I'm not particularly precious about my work in some way, because when you see it, I wrote those books, you know, that's what I did. And they don't stop existing once the TV show goes on the air. In fact, quite the reverse, more people find them, you know? And I don't write TV, you know, and so I also feel like in order to have a good interpretation of something, like I wrote, I think, good books. So if they're going to do a TV show, in order to preserve the spirit, it has to be a good TV show. And in order for it to be a good TV show, like, to be honest, if you just translated Delirium exactly into a TV show, there would be about half of it or more in which literally Lena goes around thinking things, you know? And that doesn't make for good TV. There's no narrative. I mean, you can't write a TV show like that. Would be really boring and people would turn it off. And that's not fair to the spirit of my books. So I really feel confident. There were some, and there have been some changes where I said, okay, can you reconsider doing this or this element? And they say yes, you know, but some of the changes, like, you know, that my fans get so irate about, I feel like, you know, as long as it preserves the spirit of the book and as long as it's really good, I don't care. For example, Hannah in the book is blonde and has blue eyes. In the TV shows, she's Latina. But the reason I don't care is this. The important thing about Hannah in the book is not that she has blonde hair and blue eyes. It's that she's the kind of girl who is really hot and who, if people could choose, you feel as the girl standing next to her, like, well, they would choose her. You know what I mean? The Hannah in the TV show is really hot, and she's the kind of girl that if you were standing next to her, you'd feel like if people had the right to choose, they would choose her. You know? So that's the element that they distilled from her, and that's what got translated to TV. So, yeah. I know, my fans are so much cuter and more irate on my behalf than I am. I'm like, I don't care. You know? Yeah.
Are you going to write any more Delirium?
No, I'm done with you guys. Just kidding. Yeah, no, definitely. Next year I have a book called Panic coming out, which is the story of a very small town in upstate New York, a very small kind of poor town, and a very dangerous game that the teens play every summer for very high stakes. And it's realistic, and it's kind of gritty, and it's told from a boy and a girl's point of view, and it's totally different than Delirium, and I'm very excited about it. And then I have an adult book coming out, but right now I'm working on a teen book too. So ideally, I would like to be able to do everything, and just whenever an idea occurs to me that seems teen, then I'll write that. If it's middle grade, I'll write that, because I also have 2 middle grade books. If it's adult, I'll write that. You know, I want it all. actually write, I was really shocked by the fact I recently went on a group tour. I actually seem to take longer on my books than most people do, but I write more of them simultaneously. Like, I was on tour with these people, and the longest that anybody else spent on a book draft was like 3 months. One of the girls had written her last book in 2 weeks. I usually take about 8 to 9 months, 8 months to literally just write through the first time, but I edit for another 2 to 3 months before I show it to my editor. So I take about a year to write my books. But I do often write 2 books at the same time, and that means that I'll work on both every day. So, you know, per year, I end up producing about 2 books a year, and that's why, I mean, which is my basic publishing rate. And it's not even that, you know, I never don't work. So today, I had a lot of stuff to do, but I was just writing on my BlackBerry in the back of the cab. So I did my writing in the back of cabs. If I had 5 minutes, I'll write. You know, if I'm in the bathroom, I'll just sit and write. So I kind of squeeze it in, and I think that's why I end up kind of having a lot at the end of the year. You know.
Before you start like writing your book, do you like know where they're heading, particularly the short stories?
I know where they're heading, and I definitely try to, like with my novels, I usually know what the first page is, and obviously I know what the first page is, I started, but I also usually know what the last page will be. So when I started Delirium, I knew kind of where I wanted Pandemonium to end and where I wanted Requiem to end. But there's a lot that surprises me in between. So how to get there becomes very fluid. Like I said, I tried to kill off a major character and it didn't work in Requiem. So there's a lot that is kind of that is organic and fluid. But I need to know where I'm going, because otherwise I'll just flounder around and write another 800-page novel where I describe trees for half of it. You know.
Yes. The short stories, are they only available on ebooks? Do you get the papers now?
Well, in England, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think it's...
I think they're coming
Yeah.
out.
They're not
Yeah.
here yet.
Yeah, they're
They're
coming.
not- they're
There are
coming.
ebooks right now. You can get them in America and paperback. Just saying, but hopefully someday my publishers are over there, so
They're
you
on
can
their
make
way,
it
I
cool.
think.
They're on their way.
Yeah.
It will be one day in.
It will be one day in a bind up, so yeah.
Where do you get inspiration to like make your characters and develop the character story in order to make them different?
Where do I get the inspiration kind of for my characters? Well, I mean, I pull inspiration not from, I don't base characters on real people, but I do pull inspiration from people I observe in real life. I love character work. I mean, writing about characters is one of my favorite things about being a writer. I think that I'm really interested in seeing characters change, so I like to start my characters at a place that's very different from where they end up. And the other thing I think it's important to do when you're writing about fictional people, the problem with what a lot of writers do when they're writing about a character is they make the character make too much sense. Real people don't make that much sense. People are crazy. Like, people have conflicting desires. They say they want to do one thing, they do something completely opposite. They want to get healthy, they keep smoking. They, you know, like, they are randomly addicted to blue cheese, or they hate yogurt, you know? I mean, people have these weird proclivities and desires, and they're complex. And so I always try to make my characters have some complexity that seems out of line, because then they feel like real people. So I think that's something I always try to do, is to understand where their kind of weirdness is, you know? Like, people in Hannah and Delirium, people are always like, well, but Hannah starts out, it wouldn't be surprising or realistic if Hannah from the beginning, who likes to go to parties and likes to kind of toe the line, if she's also the one who becomes rebellious, you know? But Hannah's the kind of person who likes to play at rebellion without actually risking anything, because she's not used to, because she has too much to risk, and she's not used to it. She's used to having a safe life. So, you know, you always have to think in terms of kind of the complexity of how people really are. Yes?
One of the things I love about your books is your imagery. How do you make something so mundane sound so amazing?
Well, thank you, first of all. You know, I mean, I think that it's definitely, I think over the years, I mean, there's a certain amount of practice. I mean, creativity is a kind of like muscle, and the more you practice it, the better you are at it. When I see something, first of all, I think the one issue is I am just moved by things that are beautiful. And also, I have a very private relationship to to things like beauty. Like I'm not the kind of person who sits around talking about how beautiful the world is, but I'm the kind of person who internalizes it, notices it, and then keeps it for myself and keeps it for my writing. But I do, if I see something really beautiful, or a beautiful sky or a tree, I will sometimes challenge myself to write it down and try to think about a new way of describing it or thinking about it. But I also think that, like, I'm trying to think, there was one really bad metaphor I read recently. That was, I mean, there were more than one. But, like, metaphors also are supposed to tell you what things feel like, you know? And so I think that that's the really important thing to get to, which is just if you're describing something, you need to use an image that will evoke in the reader something that feels similar, you know? So if it's a beautiful kiss, you can't compare it to like two slugs going like this, you know? Even if it's kind of accurate, that's not the right imagery to use. So I do try to practice it and think about that in terms of language and evocation. Yeah.
What led you to choose Maine as your setting for Delirium?
Are you from Maine?
Yeah.
Oh my god, I love Maine. Well, there's a literary reason and a non-literary reason. Wouldn't it be amazing if you came all the way from Maine for this event?
Just
no.
us.
But the literary reason is that I'd gone to Portland before. It seemed like the kind of place Lena would be from. It seemed like the right size. I like the fact that there's, you know, the coast, so it's on the ocean, but there's a lot of islands, so it doesn't look completely open. There's kind of this interplay between openness and enclosure, which thematically echoes the themes of the book. But the real non-literary reason is one of my best friends live there, and I wanted to go for a summer and eat lobster, and that's what I did. So that's the positive of being a writer. You just get to make decisions like that. Did you have a question?
Yeah. When you're in the middle of writing your books, are you ever able to switch off, or are you constantly thinking about the plots and the characters?
It depends. I mean, actually, you know, it's most successful, writing is most successful when you're thinking kind of continuously about them. No, but I switch off. I mean, I would go crazy. Because when I start thinking about them, I can't not write, so I would either be writing 24 hours a day, or I would be like drawing circles in mashed potatoes in a mental institution. So I try to basically, you know, about an hour or so before I actually sit down to write, at least, I'll start being like, okay, get back into it, think about what came before, think about what has come after, what needs to come after, think about the book as a whole, thematically, and then I kind of basically get to a point where my brain starts kind of, it grinds into motion, and then it starts working, and eventually I feel like, okay, I need to get to a computer, need to write this down. I'm very angry if people try to interrupt me at that point. But then when I'm done writing for the day, I do have the ability to switch off.
Do you have a favourite character that you write, or do you love them all?
I love them all in different ways. I mean, I definitely have characters that have surprised me by the depth that I end up feeling for them. I tend to often love kind of side characters, sidekick characters, not sidekick, that sounds cheesy, but friend characters a lot. But I really loved Raven in the Delirium series, I think because she reminds me of my sister. So, which again, I mean, my sister doesn't like live in the forest and know how to, you know, impale a rabbit with a tooth pried from some other animal. But my sister, you know, you put your feelings about real people into the book. So that feeling that this person knows everything and is kick-ass and like just could take care of anything and is also kind of loving but pretty intense and could be kind of cold. Like all of those things I kind of feel about my sister. Not that she's cold, but she's intense. Anyway, so I ended up really loving Raven. So I think that was like the most surprising character that I kind of first started writing and didn't realize how important she would become. You know. There's a question over here. This side is slacking. Oh yeah.
Hi. So you said that you thought that your part in telling the main story and all that is finished. You're obviously working on other things, not working on anything. Is this it for the whole of, you know, you've written short stories in between? Can I expect an epilogue at some point?
Well, I wouldn't hold your breath. No, I don't believe in epilogues. Although actually Panic has an epilogue, but it's not that kind of epilogue. I don't believe in epilogues. I don't really, it's not my thing. It's like, I believe in giving to you, dear reader, the ability to know that these characters will live with you and that the door